Okay, so the idea for this final session was really just open kind of discussion. I mean, I don't know about you, but I still have probably 10 questions in my pocket from throughout the day. So an open discussion just for all of us. Remaining questions, perhaps it's stuff to speakers or themes that still need to be picked up on. So I don't know, I'm happy to, I can kick off one that I had for the last panel. So anybody in the last panel, or perhaps broader, can chime in on this one. I think even probably some of you were there at the Milan WCG a number of years ago, where we were outside and it was raining and cold and miserable and had to take buses to the venue. And on the one hand, it was a sort of extreme of bad venues, but on the other hand, it's not totally unusual for esports events where in-person spectatorship is not really attended to very well or focused on. So I'm kind of curious, those of you who work on the spectatorship in particular, is kind of in-person, face-to-face spectatorship an important part of esports? Or is it really just about being mediated through the screen? So do we imagine a future where you want to have people sitting in places like this, in venues like this, and actually watching? Is that an important part? I don't know if anybody has any thoughts. Yeah. I'm gonna run. This one can stay up here. I think we have others.
So if you want to know, I think I will be speaking for the majority of people involved in esports when I say this. Maybe let me tell you a story. I went to my first major international LAN, that was ESWC 2003, and I sat down. Obviously I was into gaming a lot, but just a fan. I sat down in a theater with 1,000 other people watching a Quake 3 match where somebody did something amazing. There was commentary and everything. There was really good acoustics. It was a cinema theater, similar to this one, slightly, well, bigger. And one of the players did something amazing, and the entire crowd started, there was a noise in the crowd, and it was absolutely spine-shivering. It was that moment when I understood that you need to spectate, you need to enjoy it with other people, and that's the only way to go.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that as well, and it's also a good way to keep building every sport needs some sort of mystery, some sort of mythical mystery surrounding it, and the big matches can do that for us in esports as well. I was covering during the summer of 2007. It was a year after I quit playing myself, and I was at ESWC writing a story about the event for an online esports outlet. And it featured the final match of the tournament with 5,000 spectators, with the majority of the spectators rooting for one team and the other half rooting for the other. And the match went back and forth, and the crowd went back and forth. And by the end, when it reached its climax, it was absolutely amazing. And everybody who was there definitely told someone about it and how cool it was. And everybody that watched online was dying to get their hands on live footage, pictures, other kinds of media, stories about the match. And that's how the magical moments of the gaming, of the esports can live on throughout the years. And it's still talked about, that match.
And you also need the physical presence of the players there, because then you see all the in-between the matches. You focus on the screen. Sometimes you get a snapshot of his face, okay. But seeing things like, you know, a major player in a major final, in between maps, picking up the phone from his mother, who's cheering him on, you know, these stories, or anything spicy, anything, you know, outside of the box, which makes these players three-dimensional, not just a nickname and a picture, but a personality and a story, and more than just the final result. That's very important as well.
But what does that mean concretely at tournaments, right? So I'm thinking again now, maybe WCG it's a little unfair to pick on them for this, but like at WCG, when you go to the grand final, so much stuff is happening in places you can't access, right? I mean, it may be invisible to you guys because you get access, but like average spectators can't get back and see all those matches. So do tournaments really need to fundamentally restructure how they operate so that we all can get close to those folks?
Absolutely. It comes down to defining product again, making a good product. One of the older tournaments that for a lot of reasons are not around anymore was called the CPL. And they went from being in a basement to trying to take it one step further. First they added like a beamer and you could sit there and there were like 20 chairs and you sat there and you watched someone play. Then that tournament area grew bigger and bigger and bigger. And you know what? Even when I was there as a journalist, unless I got into the backstage area, there was never nothing for me to do. Like they were sponsored to pay $100,000 or $50,000 to get in there, plus what their own activation cost to bring in staff and materials for a booth. And after 10 minutes, you had seen everything. There was no entertainment value whatsoever, and no one has cracked that nut yet. I do think that the Intel Extreme Mass is probably the closest thing to it right now, but I don't think they have done it either. Like no one has really cracked the nut of like, how do you keep people entertained?
A big part of the problem as for spectators at tournaments is that I'm sure, I've never organized a tournament, but I'm sure it's pretty expensive to have a tournament in an exhibition hall at CBIT or wherever. So people tend to cram too many matches into, well, you might have even 4 matches playing out simultaneously and inside of a tournament area with all the crowds outside. And what's the highlight of football? It's watching the matches. And that's why you don't have 2 football matches at the same time. They did a couple of years back, they had a lot of matches at the same time in the Champions League, but then they start spreading them out a little bit more to obviously make more money also. But we need to give the matches are a gift to the fans, and every organizer needs to realize that.
I'm curious, Ryan, if you have any thoughts. You probably can't see it, but there's actually a picture of a match here at DreamHack.
Oh, right.
It was really interesting to see at DreamHack, the fighter guys were there on the side.
Yep.
And the crowd was just, impressed at the
Yeah.
You guys held it around, really energetic, which is
Yeah.
so different than that the CS players cordon off in the back room.
Right. I mean, it reminds me of these like really old school events for whatever, like Stampede Wrestling or or like boxing, where technology hadn't been developed as as thoroughly as it has now. So you didn't have all these really cool digital cameras that can capture all the footage, and it was really just word of mouth. I mean, unless you could be there, it was just from what the next guy told you, and it gave that priority to actually being at the event. And I think that just on a personal level, if it doesn't matter how good these capturing equipment get in the future, there's never anything better than actually being there in person and experiencing it for yourself. And that is what people pay for when they pay to spectate at an event. There's something that you take home with you from actually being at an event. There will always be things you can only talk about. That saying is, you had to be there. I mean, it really is true, because no matter what you see on the internet, or no matter how well someone describes through words what an experience looked like or felt like, it's never the same as if you're actually there. And also, it's a very good marketing tool, because if you watch, for example, like WWE, and you see 600,000 people at in a massive arena in Madison Square Garden or whatever, you want to be there. You're looking at this event and where everyone's having fun, there's entertainment value, and you want to be a part of it. And I think for anything like for esports, I think it'd be a good way to get people to see that this is something that they need to get behind, they need to be involved with. And at DreamHack specifically, it was very nice that I had support there. On a personal level, I could actually feel that they were with me. They were in the match with me, and they were understanding exactly what was going on as it was transpiring. And then likewise, for the opposing team, my opponent has his supporters and stuff like that. So when I'm losing, I feel the pressure because they're all cheering for him to win and stuff like that. And we were the minority being on foreign turf, so you always feel it a little bit stronger. But I will definitely say that you always need to have that sort of spectator environment, that in-house spectator environment. One thing I have to add is that most tournament organizers, it's very difficult to predict how many people you will have watching, and most tournament organizers are scared to hell of having an empty having an empty stage. ESL, I'm not going to take credit for it because obviously I haven't worked for the company for more than just over a year. The guys, David and the other guys, have done and Alex as well, have done a magnificent job with. They have the so-called Intel Friday Night game, where basically out of a league season they would have a couple of highlight matches held at a live venue, and then they started out really with 50 people, maybe 25, and 80. And then the record, I think, is 2,500, 1,500. 2,000 is the record, but that's a regular thing, regular recurring thing. Then it's no problem. But when you have a standalone event which happens once a year, once every 6 months, then you will always be afraid of the risk. Hey, we're going to have to, hide the chairs because the place looks empty. That's what one of the major events that you can see on the photos there had to face this problem. And every time they have this problem. So, sometimes I don't blame the organizers for trying to play it safe and actually playing it down with the show.
Someone else with a question?
I have a question. We've sort of talked about it slightly on this sort of idea of performance enhancement when Grubby was talking about just the choice of water was something that might enhance his performance. But now that we've got both communities and players, maybe we can talk a little bit about those sort of bodily performance enhancing things that are going around that are sort of related a bit more to cheating. If you've seen anything in your own scene or have had any experience with players, or as community managers, what are you doing about people that are taking performance enhancing drugs, so to speak?
Well, as far as I know, there was one company also that announced that there would be drug tests, and it was a publicity stunt more than anything else. But we as an industry, we don't really have the tools, and we are not at the professional level yet where we can actually test that. And we would probably like to have the same thing as in chess, where even too high caffeine levels are prohibited, but we're definitely not at this level yet. And let's face it, gaming is not big enough to really attract that kind of enhancement on a wide scale. In the amateur levels, the bigger problems is what David mentioned, is that we have digital enhancement. We have cheaters. That's a major problem. The performance enhancement drugs, they happen. I've heard stories, I've written an article about it, but we as a community, we don't really have the tools yet. We're not there yet to actually do that. I mean, obviously we would like to, but we really have other things to spend our money on. This is the hard truth. This is the hard fact.
So maybe we go over to the players then, because I understand, of course, it takes a bit of funding and money to organise that, but as players, you want to be playing on an even playing field. Are there sort of internal, spoken between you guys only rules that's going on about?
No, throughout my career, it's never been an issue. I don't think I have never seen anything to that regard, and I don't know if you count having too many Coca-Colas, because a lot of people have too many Coca-Colas, but most top players prefer water, and I haven't heard stories about enhancement in that terms as well. As I've heard rumors of cheating, but at tournaments, but they did not involve drugs per se.
So none of the Ritalin. That's what I've heard, is the Ritalin.
That's what I heard as well. Ritalin, Adderall, and those anti-ADD drugs. Yeah. But as far as I know, most drugs, from my research for the article, of course, most drugs would actually make you a lesser player rather than help. At least the recreational ones.
I have another question I could pick up on with this. It's not really the drugs, but it's actually, I was curious, and again, maybe this is probably both for players and the tournament folks. You'll probably notice another one of the pictures up here, and again, Ryan, you'll probably notice it perhaps most at DreamHack is equipment, and the way equipment is so integral to esports performance. So I'm thinking about the sticks professional fighters use, but we could also talk about monitors. And I mean, I remember being struck the first tournament I went to, all the guys pulled out their own keyboards and mice. And, so how does actual technology and equipment play into your performance?
Well, yeah, I mean, a few years back when console conversions weren't that good, everything was based on arcade versions because that was, the pinnacle of what we could get our hands on. And everyone played on arcade, so nobody played on control pad and things like this. Then once consoles started to get better and the quality of what you could find at home was stronger, then we started to have a divide of some people preferring joysticks and some people preferring pad, and then later on a further divide between this company of joystick, this type of pad and things like this. Some with maybe a kind of auto fire, and some with a certain type of joystick, maybe an 8-way, maybe a 4-way, and things like this. A different size button, a Seimitsu button, a Sanwa button, different joystick finishes and stuff like that. A lot of players found the transition from playing on arcade to home console very difficult because joysticks would slip around on their lap. They wouldn't have a solid base, which the arcade cabinet allows. They would have to get used to playing with the stick on their lap, or they would have an extra chair to put the stick on to have it balanced on top of that. And because of that, some really good players actually do suffer in big tournaments because of the lack of comfort with what they're using. Now we've come so many years along. There are so many joysticks to choose from. There are so many peripherals in the market you can buy. And every player does tend to stick with a certain company or a certain style of joystick. Personally, I prefer the Mad Catz joystick because it has a very sturdy weight. It's very heavy, so when you have it on your lap, it doesn't slide around during play, and everything is very durable on the stick. You don't have things you don't have buttons that stop working and things like that. So I think that joysticks have come a long way in since the early days, and your equipment does play a very, very big part in what you're doing. Nowadays, turbo fire and auto fire and things like that are actually illegal in tournaments because they do enhance particular characters within the game. So although you would think that, well, everyone's using the same equipment, surely it's fair, there are things you can use with the equipment that's out these days to kind of not break the game, but make things, push things in your favor, because they're only applicable for certain characters, making it unfair if you're not one of those, don't happen to be using one of those characters. And that's how I see it at the moment. I think that equipment is very, very important, but what's available is pretty much quite even. There isn't any specific one company that has the ultimate joystick or the ultimate pad. Everyone has their unique preferences, and that's how it is.
Yeah. I mean, there's, of course, Kim maybe has something to say, but also like the tournament organizers in terms of the equipment you're providing, right? I mean, the whole sort of move from CRTs to...
One other thing I'll add. So with the 6-axis pad for the PS3, we had issues where a player actually happened in Evolution last year 2008 in Las Vegas, where in the grand finals, which I happened to be in, a player from the crowd who had played his previous match on the same setup accidentally pressed the PS button and paused the match. So a player who wasn't even involved in the match actually happened to get involved in the grand finals of this tournament. So the most anticipated match of the tournament was ruined. And it was very, controversial and stuff. Just to let you know how it ended, we had to play the whole set again. So it actually disturbed the whole flow of whoever was winning at the time, etc. But this is all because the battery hadn't been removed from the 6-axis pad. So now, since that and other small events that have had problems of a similar nature, you have to now, if you want to use a 6-axis pad, remove the battery first before you're allowed to participate. So, you go in at the beginning of the tournament, you form a line, everyone's pad is checked individually, then you're allowed to enter and things like this. So it's almost like a new ruling to how console gaming is being shaped. But I mean, it's something that has to be done because we can't have big events being, having such detrimental events happening. So with the sticks, you don't have the same problem, but definitely with the Xbox and the PS3 pad, you have those issues there.
That's interesting.
And then with monitoring now, with everything becoming HD, you have problems with, oh, I can't play on that screen, it's got lag. And then the next guy comes along and says, no, it hasn't, it's fine, I'm fine here. So you have a kind of a difference between how people feel on the game. It could also just come back to basics, like not feeling comfortable in an alien environment. You know, sometimes you just feel uncomfortable and you'll put blame anywhere you can see fit, you know. And so a lot of tournament organizers prefer to use CRTs, which are kind of blame-free, and you know, everyone's happy and no one, you know, it's kind of equal for everyone. So yeah, I just think that it's going to take a while before we have the ultimate format for fighting game tournaments on console, because no matter what setup you have these days, everyone will have something to say. So yeah, still in the, yeah, I don't know, it's kind of teething stages right now.
Did anybody else want to chime in on that one, tournament folks, or Kim? Or
So I work for a company that develops gaming peripherals. So we do mice, keyboards, headsets. And you know what? The benchmark for making a good product is actually different than most people think. It's not coming up with like the awesomest idea, because they're easy to do. It's actually a two-step process. You have first to create something that is so good that someone will use it, which is, and you can ask any of the people in the industry here, which is almost impossible to do. If you take the gaming mice as an example that has been developed over the last 6 years, and you see how much penetration they have really had into the core of the competitive players, it's 5%. Most of these guys are using mice from 2001, 2002 still. Because they were reliable. Because they had a lot of things that just made them really perfect for competitive play as it is right now. So the first benchmark for developing something now is honestly to come up with something that's good enough. And then the second one becomes preaching technology. And actually, you can come up with technologies. We came up with a new way that a laser mouse worked. It was reading. No one had ever done it. And on paper, it looked amazingly awesome. The performance was just awesome. And then you put it in the hands of players, and they're like, I don't like how it feels. Could immediately feel that it just feels different, and it's not what they're used to. And they never crossed the threshold of then actually getting to a point and wondering, if this thing good, will it make me better? It's just, it feels weird. And it stops right there.
Other questions? Open forums?
There's a couple from online.
Oh.
There's one that's been spammed about 10 times. I think we should take it. And it's directed to you, Alex. It's what we talked about before. My computer's gone dead here. Okay. How big is the influence of the G7 Teams Federation? Rather big question. But also, how are the organisations within the federation sort of playing along with the development and practicing the mission that's been created? If you could just give us a little bit.
Well, first of all, you need to understand that the G7 is something that we do voluntarily. So, you know, you have people, like I'm one of those, I'm paid by SK, I make my living out of SK, so I gotta make sure this company runs 100%. And then still, you know, I have a lot of ideas and I need to get people behind, and G7 is the right forum to do so, because there's a lot of influential people inside that together as a group, we can move things. The way we work to the outside, and we've had a lot of criticism ever since we announced the G7, is that people don't see us work 100%. That's, I can understand that, but our role is more or less behind the curtain. If problems occur within the community or we feel something needs to be addressed, we'd rather go out there and talk to the people involved instead of posting something on our websites and, you know, making a flame war, because that doesn't bring us anywhere. We want to have solutions for problems. I think the first problem we ever addressed was an American league, the World Series of Video Gaming. I think it was those guys who tried to sign a sponsorship with a headset company for their series, so players that would enter a tournament wouldn't be allowed to wear their own headsets. That would interfere a lot with the contracts we as teams or the players as players have with their sponsors. So that was a no-go. So we went to this organization, discussed with them, and I think 3 months after they announced it, they officially said it was off the table. Now, I wouldn't say it was 100% our pressure that put them in this direction, but we played a huge role in that. We never made a press release about it because it doesn't make sense. We had players switching from teams, contracts being broken among G7 teams as well. And we as an organization stepped up, discussed the issue, found a solution, worked with tournament organizations on the other hand to make sure that, players that break contracts are not allowed to play in these competitions in the future. But that's all that's happening behind the curtain. And if we're talking about present problems, like let's address ESWC. They filed for bankruptcy. Now they have a new ownership for the brand, and they're not making up for the money that's being owed from 2008. There's a lot of players out there which say, hey, this is unfair. Yeah, and it is. It is absolutely unfair, but what can you do about it? So the question is, you need to work behind, you need to find legal ground to put arguments on, to put action on, and to take it to the next level. And there's a lot of coordination behind. That's what we do, that's what we try to do. So we need to talk a lot to people which are not involved with G7 to solve problems. We need to discuss it internally. We need to find solutions within the group, because everybody has his own agenda, of course. And that's basically what we do. And I can understand that people say from the outside, it's not a lot of stuff going on with G7. The opposite is happening, but it's not something that we can put out to the public. Karmik, or Mihao, he knows that we talk a lot behind the curtain about issues, and it goes either way. I mean, they address us to solve situations for them. We address them if we see a problem, but that's nothing you would put into news on the website. So I think our influence, after all, there is an influence, and it's good that it's there, but it's not like we are a ruling force in esports.
Thanks. Can I ask a follow-up G7 question, or is the other one also
No,
related
go
to
for
G7? I mean, in terms of G7, I mean, has there been much or any consideration on sort of creating standardized contracts, transparency in contracting players, and maybe, I mean, I know G7 does a lot sort of advocating for teams, but what about sort of player advocacy and transparency in contracts and things? Is there any of that sort of happening within G7?
Well, the contract issue is quite a good topic to see what's really happening. So we put out a standardized G7 contract. We try to put in all the arguments we have from our contracts. But then at the end of the day, if a Danish team is signing a player, they need to apply to a different law set than I have to with a German company. So what we put out there is a recommendation. We say, this is a standardized contract, but you need to individualize it for you as a player, for you as a team. What we try to do is show you the balance between the rights of a player and the rights of a team, but you need to make it up as a player with your team, or you as a team need to make it up with your player. The balance needs to be discussed between those two parties. And what I said before is, whenever I, as SK Gaming, enter a competition and I fight a team, let's say it's Lowland Lions, and at some point they have a Counter-Strike player which is kick-ass, and I want to have this guy on my roster. Whether Lowland Lions is using a G7 contract or not, it doesn't matter. I play them on a professional level, and in this very moment I accept them as a professional team. So if they have a legitimate document saying this player is bound to my organization, I have to respect it. No matter if any lawyer in the world says, yeah, we can sneak around the contract here or there. I think that there needs to be a common understanding of that. I and SK Gaming as a brand, we live up to that. We try to live up to that. Of course, we fight for players. That's out of the question. And sometimes we test, how far can we go. But usually this common understanding is there. And as G7, we feel the responsibility even more.
Is that the norm or the exception in the scene? Or is there a lot of kind of, yeah?
Well, I think there's different levels of how to address this. One is the most professional teams will try to approach it the most professional way, probably. But then you have a lot of teams which are not as organized, not as professional, and they don't see that other teams are as professional already. And then they try to, just work around, like, you take my shovel, I take your shovel. It doesn't work that way. We try to build it more and more on a professional ground, and then all of the different levels need to accept that there is a level for all of us that we have to agree upon. If not, then it doesn't work. The whole system won't work. But I think from the discussions we had and from the issues we had in terms of players going from A to B, so far it all turned out to be good. There was no stealing of players where one side was ripped off or something.
There wasn't another one along G7, but there's been a little bit of talk in general about, well, going back to the last question that I think we left on a line on gender in games maybe, but maybe we can sort of flip that question for starting with the community people and maybe ask, is there a lot of talk within your communities about masculinity and games and what kind of players you want in terms of masculinity? It seems that there's a very specific type of person playing this kind of games, and how do we sort of broaden out who's playing in terms of age, lifestyle, whatever else you want to talk about? I'm just wondering if masculinity is something that comes up in conversations about community building or not.
I don't think that gender is really an issue, because we're talking about 16 to 22-year-olds, and I don't think that they really have a gender image of themselves that much. So the word masculinity is not really used, but I think we have substitutes that are used that could be related to masculinity. If we think of esports, I think of it mainly as a competitive sport. And being competitive and being an achiever in something, that's something that goes along with the word masculinity for me. So yeah, I think there is an element of that, but it's not really focused on the gender as much. And if we're talking about different age and different backgrounds, you have everybody in esports, at least from the male population. It's really a cross-cut of the population that we have, all kinds of education levels, ages, income levels. It's hard to pin it down to any specific group. Although when we are talking about girls, I think it's different, and there's a specific type of women that play in our leagues, and it's mainly the kind of women that are more into male culture, be it games or sports. I think if we're talking women's soccer, there's also a specific type of woman that goes to play football. And I may be a bit general here, and I don't want to sound too harsh on females, but I think we have a certain type of women that are playing computer games competitively. And I guess that it's a type of women that also would use other competitive pastimes if they weren't using computer games.
Just to continue on it, because that's exactly what I'm talking about, and maybe Paul, you might have something on this with broadcasting, that the language that we use might sort of repeat that it's somehow a male sport, whilst I'm sure if I look into the audience there might be a couple of women here that have played FPSs since they came out. And that starts to start to regenerate that it's not for them. So I'm just wondering if there's maybe some politics around the language that you even use as journalists, how you talk about gamers, games and gamers, how you talk about female gamers, how you talk about male gamers. It's very common in sports, especially when the Olympics are going on. And I'm just wondering if that's something that's come up already in your field.
Well, we talk about gamers and we talk about female gamers, so there is certainly a division in wording, yeah. And I don't think anybody does this consciously, to be honest.
I have to disagree with David quite heavily. I think I remember back in 2008, Electronic Sports World Cup have always traditionally held a female Counter-Strike tournament. And it's always been very popular, despite the fact that it's segregated, if you like, similar in a way to tennis has been in the past. But from my point of view, and it is just my point of view, there should be no difference. There is no physical difference that matters when it comes to pressing keys and moving a mouse around a table. It shouldn't make no difference at all. There is an obvious skill difference, but I think it's more to do with Males have been playing these games potentially a lot longer. I don't agree with the whole certain types of women play games. I think that's wrong. I've seen a wide range of ladies playing it, and a wide range of ages playing games as well. And I think if you talk specifically about Counter-Strike, you could get down one track. But for instance, there was a lady, I think she was, I don't know, late 40s or something. She played in a league. She got paid to play. Okay, you could call the league Mickey Mouse if you want, but whatever. She was still a female gamer that enjoyed playing gaming well into her 40s. There are plenty of people out there playing casual games on the Wii right now. My nan plays on it. My father plays on it. There are no boundaries as far as I'm concerned, because gaming doesn't have that segregation of physical attributes that are required to play a specific game. Going back to the ESWC thing, I thought what was interesting, I don't necessarily agree or disagree with this, but a lot of the male players were actually upset that there was a female Counter-Strike tournament that they could win. I don't know, guys, you can help me out here. I think it was 30,000 maybe? Yeah, so it was a lot of money, and a lot of the guys were actually upset that money was, in theory, taken away from their ability to win that money by the fact that they couldn't enter because they weren't female. Again, as I said, I don't necessarily agree or disagree with that. I just think that's an interesting insight, perhaps, to the way that we've consciously or unconsciously gone about segregating female gaming.
Oh yes, Ryan, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting how you mentioned that the female gamer was seen as a threat to the male gamers because she could potentially disrupt their aims at the tournament. I just came back 2 days ago from Japan where I entered a qualification for the World Championships, and there were girl gamers in the tournament as well. And not only were they in the tournament, but they were winning as well against male gamers. So, for me, coming from Europe, that's quite a new thing to see visually, that, oh wow, that girl beat that guy who's a really famous guy. So it's not just a random person, it's someone who's established and well known. And to see that girl dominate against him just goes to show that, the perception or almost a misconception that girls can't be as good as guys is totally false. And I think that it's almost like we've been subconsciously ingrained with that knowledge that it's just a girl, she's not going to be as good as the guy, and things like this. And then to go to Japan and have that experience to come back with, shows me something different. But I also think it's maybe part of the culture that, here, maybe, I don't know, maybe especially in the fighting game world, that girls aren't playing as much as guys are. And I'm not sure if it's just an interesting thing. Maybe some girls just don't want to play violent games. They don't feel like they want to kill the other guy. Whereas, guys are running on testosterone, they're more aggressive, they want to get certain emotions out. I'm not sure if that's connected, but it very well may be. And there's definitely a difference in what, in terms of, I think gaming is very generalized. I think if you break it down, you then see a bigger difference in where people are going. And especially with fighting games, I think that there aren't as many females playing as there are as many men playing. I'm not sure if it's anything to do with the fact that females don't feel they can get involved, but it might just be natural taste. It might just be that they don't like those particular games as much as men do, and that's what makes the divide.
I'm just going to check. I think for me as a sociologist, what's useful to think about is sort of what are the structural mechanisms that help or hinder entry into the field, right? So, do you have the networks that you train with? Do you have people you play with every day who are pushing you to be better? Do you get admitted onto a team even though you're slightly weaker, but by playing with better people, you get pushed, and all, sort of those structural things that shape how women enter into gaming is, I think, and this goes back to, how domestic leisure technologies are used and who has disposable income. And there's like a whole layer, but structural things rather than, women just don't like to compete. Because I think, we could identify a lot of women who, love competition, don't mind violent games. There's probably something else going. That's with my sociologist hat on.
What you mentioned, as far as I know, many girls are the minority, and they're the, let's say, interesting minority for male gamers, and they go through a lot of harassment online. And they very often, when I was a journalist, they very often mentioned that they just don't want to deal with that. This is one of the reasons why they would prefer being segregated. Some of them, not all of them. But to touch upon what Paul said, in competitive judo, I observed females and males, and there are, beyond the physical differences between the genders, there are visible, very visible differences in how men and women react in a competitive environment. A fight between two women in judo will be tactically and on all, let's say, mental levels, extremely, very, very different from a male fight. I mean, the average one. And considering that, let's say, I do one thing which I find completely acceptable and my girlfriend will go nuts over it, two genders interpret the same situation in two completely different ways. Why shouldn't both genders in competition also think differently? I mean, I agree that women should be allowed to compete with men, but I also see reasons why they should be allowed to have their own leagues and competitions, simply based on the fact that we think differently. We're not just physically different.
If you don't, do you mind me commenting on just specifically to that one? And for me, that goes back to what Theo was saying about the structure thing. I come from professional basketball and was lucky enough to have a coach that coached the men's team and the women's team in the same way. So I didn't quite see those same things. And I think, again, that whole idea of coaching and how we are taught to play and how that filters down. And the second point of that is with men's and women's teams through sports throughout the years, which is sort of a structure that we see going into esports, the better coaches tend to go to the men's teams. So you'll also have a much weaker coach coaching women players that might not have that same understanding of what competitive sports might be. So I still think I can understand your position and looking at it, but I also look to those structures that are really unseen sometimes.
In judo, let me state most of the clubs, at least in Poland, which is where I observed, obviously, we had the same coaches pretty much.
Yeah, okay.
And women very often trained together with men all the time. So
Yeah.
At our team, the female gamers, they get exactly the same treatment as the male gamers do. But there's, I think, one factor we can just try to sneak around. There's like a penetration of 90 to 95% male gamers that we're talking about, that we're attracting right now. So having female gamers is a good thing. It's a very nice thing because it opens up the whole market to a new target group, new budgets, new traction, new product, whatsoever. So having these gamers is something that we need to take care of. They shouldn't be scared off by male gamers who, you know, put their fists against their breasts and say ooga ooga and stuff like that. They should have their own corner. Therefore, I totally disagree with Paul if you try to say that. I think it's a very good sign for ESWC, for example, to have this one tournament. It's a very good sign for Arbalest to having this female tournament because it encourages more female gamers to say, hey, you know, I'll follow these teams. I will enter this market because, yes, we can discuss about it's an equal market and female gamers have the same chances as male do. But as a matter of fact, looking at the numbers, they don't. So if we want to do something against it, we have to separate it right now. We have to make sure that there's a corner for female gamers or for female gaming to develop probably in the same way as male gaming did before. It's just as it is.
Yeah, I think in Counter-Strike's history, there have been a total of 3 female teams who would go to that 1 or 2 female tournaments a year, and then they would also go to the, and I won't call them male tournaments, I'll call them the normal unisex tournaments where anyone can come and compete. It's has nothing to do with allowing people to compete. Everyone is welcome, no matter what your religion or gender or skin race, whatever. So what I find a little sad in this whole discussion is actually, you know, where it started. You started with the first question and you labeled yourself a female gamer. And I don't understand why you would need to label yourself. Like, oh, I play games, and I listen to music, and I watch movies. I'm a human being.
Because I always have to justify my presence in the gaming community, because otherwise that identity is taken from me, because it is a masculine identity. My presence in gaming communities is totally delegitimized, which is why I have to self-identify as a female gamer, because I'm constantly facing sexism and
Yeah, which of course is completely crappy, and it, you know, I don't doubt you for even a split second. You know, just as I think the most used derogatory word in gaming is probably gay, right? Come on, you've all been there. You play online, and you're a faggot. It comes a lot. I don't think it comes with necessarily, oh, you're a woman. Like, I think just in general, when you're dealing with a male population that is predominantly young and very much anonymous when they're sitting online, they all tend to become assholes, really.
But I think there's actually an interesting point, perhaps prompted by Emma's thing, is like, it's going back to the masculinity thing. I mean, in the same way that there are groups of women gamers that may be locked out of competitive play because of the way the field is constructed, I actually think there's male gamers that are locked out of it, right? There are men who don't want to run the gauntlet. There are men who don't want to be called fag. You know, I mean, like, so I mean, it's also the way men get entrapped in the same systems of, I mean, I'm actually struck by how Grubby was talking about the beginning, we were talking about the sort of different demeanors and different ways of carrying yourself in the scene, right? And how right now it kind of falls along sort of titles, but we might think about people who want to play Counter-Strike, but actually even men might stand outside of it because of the way masculinity gets constructed in the scene. So I don't think it's just about women, is I guess the punchline of what I'm saying.
Yeah, just an interesting observation.
Oh, and maybe we should pass the mic because it's still.
I thought I had loud.
Yeah. The stream. We want to make sure you get on the stream, though.
Yeah, interesting observation in light of even all of the structural things around this masculinity, femininity ideals, our traditional ideals of them, is that of the gaming community, the most prominent presence at the elite level is in what's thought to be, or would be thought to be, a very traditionally masculine genre of game, Counter-Strike. So it's just an interesting observation that even within all those structural things, that there's still a certain female that is very not only interested, but is able to break through whatever structures that are being presented and compete, obviously, very well.
Other questions, or if it's free for all. So I had one more.
I've also got one.
Yeah,
I'll give the stream a chance. So, what are your thoughts on Blizzard's policy regarding licensing tournaments and their general attempts to dumb down their games to make them available to a broader audience? Maybe if we just start with the first part, Blizzard's policy regarding licensing tournaments, and especially in light of what's happening right now, would be interesting to talk about.
Oh, and turn it on. I think it's off. Yeah.
The way I got engaged with gaming was Quake. And Quake is so much based on setting up your dedicated server. I mean, in the old days, not Quake Live right now. And I loved the idea of everybody being able to set up their own tournaments with a game like that and just make it happen. So my personal point of view is I don't like the whole licensing idea, but I feel it necessary for a certain type of tournament, because the more professional you go, the more money you put into a tournament, the more attraction you put onto a tournament, the more you need to make sure as a developer or as a publisher of a game that the game is played exactly like you planned it to be played. Now, probably Carmack can go on with that one.
About Blizzard and the licensing? No comment.
I mean, we were talking about this actually in the PhD course, because I think it is very interesting, not just Blizzard, but the way game companies in general are interested in. I mean, it's interesting to me that our sporting space now intersects with commercial properties, right? So we were talking in our course about, basketball was created. Nesmith didn't walk around saying you can't use my 5 rules or 13 or whatever it was to start, right? There is basketball. Nobody's going to stop the kid on the corner from playing. What are the kind of critical political implications if our sports start taking place in commercialized properties that companies have some authority over, or at least believe they have some authority over? I think it's a kind of interesting provocation for all of us. I mean, I think I remember last year when we had this event, and Henry, you may recall, we were talking to Alex Garfield, Alex Conroy, and they were talking about how, well, we're lucky Gabe Newell doesn't come along and sort of say, take down all those replays and the videos, and that, because it's not really our intellectual property. It's another So I just think there's an interesting political, critical question there. Yeah.
My question is maybe some food for thought. Does the performance of Grubby in the World Cyber Games final belong to Blizzard?
Yeah, that's exactly a question that I was discussing with a lawyer like a year ago. So who has the rights of broadcasting? The broadcasting company, the publisher? Does the player own his own right?
Right.
It's a question that is unanswered right now. And I guess it's territory as well.
Well, so I'll just say that we had, I think were you talking about our cyber?
No, I was talking about our esports thing, but the
so I'll tell
machinima
you,
thing also.
we had another conference at Stanford last spring about machinima and rights. And the issue is basically the same. The performance of somebody in a space that's owned by a company. We had somebody there from Blizzard, we had somebody there from Microsoft who have both issued policies about this, and other companies in trying to develop a working document. And there are a couple of reasons why this is really uncharted territory at the moment. First of all, there have been no major legal precedents set, partly because in the case of machinima, and I think in the case of esports too, the game developers, the guys in the companies, are fans in that context. You know, they're reluctant to go after, you know, a machinima maker, let's say, or I would guess they would feel the same way about one of the leagues to make a point. And they also have some business reasons to maybe not pursue it in the court. Maybe they would not want to have a precedent set if they're not sure of what the outcome would be. Another issue, at least in the United States, is that the attempt to figure out the legal answer to that question, which would be based on things like copyright law, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act and all that sort of thing. Well, in practice, contract law has kind of taken over in that you have the shrink wrap agreements that people agree to when they play the game, when they open up the game, that sometimes take away rights that you might have under the copyright situation. So it becomes a question of what does the game developer put in that package? You know, what will they require of the person playing that game that they've agreed to by virtue of installing it, that may in fact not be a requirement of copyright law, but something that you've agreed to because you've agreed to play that game. So the short answer is, it's all very muddy right now. We're trying with the machinima makers, we hope within the next month or two, to issue guidelines for people making machinima that, you know, the Stanford Law School and some other people have gone through to sort of tell us we're not giving people bad advice. And that might be something that might be applicable in your space as well, or it might not be. It depends on the particular notions of what the performance is and that sort of thing. There's some issues that you probably don't have a problem with game developers in that machinima makers would have, such as a machinima maker might, as a part of their narrative in a creative production, use something that the game developer for their next expansion might want to use, so that if the game developer doesn't protect that storyline, let's say, they're going to be in a bad situation as far as releasing a game later. I don't think there's anything Grubby would do in a game, in a competitive environment, that would have the same implications for the future development of the game. I doubt that. So there's some differences there as well. It all makes it into a very muddy, kind of complicated thing. And I guess, you know, one question I would have for you guys is, how much of a consideration is this for you? Some machinima guys have said, there's things I'm not going to be able to do as far as commercialize, making money off what I'm trying to do. There are just some things where I can't go there. I can't make t-shirts based on my machinima and sell them as an income source. With some exceptions, I can't charge people to come to my website to look at my machinima, those kinds of things. Do you have any things like that where your business models kind of get fuzzy because you're not sure where it's going to go?
I'm going to talk about, just from a broadcasting point of view, over the internet rather than any TV productions, but the company that I part own and run, Quad V, is literally just following gaming events and tournaments around the world, both on the internet and at events live. We have the added layer of complication in that, similar to what Alex was saying about replays and so on, I'm of the firm opinion that the players that are paid by the teams to perform at events, these guys need some way of generating traffic or revenue back, and by holding the replays, that's what it does. So I think that's right, but there is that muddy water of, well, they've used someone else's property to develop that. It becomes even muddier for us because we're actually broadcasting the players playing the game, and it becomes a minefield. And we've had not a massive amount of problems with it, but there are, and I won't name them because I think it's unfair, but there have been a couple of publishers who have come to us and said, we think this is our property. And that already causes us great concern because we are a profit company, but we don't make a great deal of profit. We try and break even to provide a service for esports, and I'm not going to get all moralistic about it, but we're genuinely hobbyists, and we do this as a way of getting by and providing a service. To generate any money back from that, we are not in a position where we are able to charge people for a premium stream because of laws like that, because we would be selling content which in theory is partly not ours, and this still hasn't been cleared up. So you're right, it's very, very murky, but even murkier, I think, beyond replays and highlights and stuff for online broadcast of esports, and it's only going to get more complicated as more publishers claim that you can only use their product if you've paid a corporate fee or whatever. In the old days when we first started, the reason I think this has not been attacked so far is that I would sit at home on my PC that I've purchased, on a game that I've purchased, and I would stream over the internet via Winamp, and therefore audio only. So it never became a problem, but as technology has grown and as we've got better at doing what we're doing and producing more TV-like quality broadcasting, the publishers are now switched on to this and thinking, well, actually, I'd like a piece of that. Thanks very much. So it really is going to be very difficult to function as a company, as a broadcasting company, within esports alone going forward.
So the question is, many machinima makers have told me this. They have thought, okay, I'll do some sort of licensing deal with them. And they have not been able to get the attention because they're considered small potatoes to the game developers. They go to the right people, they do this sort of thing, they just don't get answers back because they're not on the radar. It's not going to be that important to say Blizzard or whoever it might be. If your idea was to license what you were doing, would you get the attention right away? Are you bigger potatoes, or would you have the same problem?
I think, to be fair, we probably have the same problem. I don't think publishers look at what Quad V do on a regular basis other than check it out now and again when there's a tournament that's going on that's involving their game. We've had one licensing issue with a game where the company basically told us that they were not allowing that game to be broadcast anywhere. Had signed an exclusive deal with a company in the States. I think everyone in the room that's around eSport will know who I'm talking about. And that proved very difficult because it was the majority of our commentary. And we wrote a very polite email and explained that we weren't making masses of money. We weren't in a position to be able to pay the $250,000 they were asking to license the game to broadcast it. And that we'd made a gross profit of about $3,000 in 3 years. So what they were asking was unreasonable, and we asked for some slack, and they gave it to us. So I think if it gets to that point, then yeah, they've been okay, because I think they see. I think it's more for Machinima. I mean, we're making money from their product, so I accept that there's a responsibility to air it properly and not slag off the game and make out that it's a bad game or what have you. So we do be careful with that. With Machinima, I think it's crazy when they're not trying to make any money. They're doing it for something they love, and they're benefiting the publisher by showing off their game in such a way that's beautiful sometimes, that makes people go out and play that game or buy it. So I think that's a bit harsh on the Machinima guys. Us, I'm not so sure about.
Is there anything else on the street?
Not really, they're just chatting.
Any other? Is everybody just ready to go to the bar? Yeah, okay, we can do that then. Thanks again, everyone, for coming. Please do join us at the bar across the way. And if you haven't yet, I don't know if they're still there, but take a look at the games that the students are producing. It's in the lab right next door. But otherwise, thank you again all for coming, and those of you speaking for flying in and being here with us. So appreciate it.